Krishna Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Purani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vasadyani Shantarini Namaste Saraswati Deve Purani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vasudhya Vishatarini Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Gaura Hari Bol Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Gaura Hari Bol Prabhupada 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 Jai Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada Shri Srinitai Gaura Hari Ki Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Shri Srinitai Gaura Nandi Hari Hari Bol So, Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for joining us this week as we continue our discussions on chapter 25. And this is part 3. The chapter is called Personal and Impersonal Realization. They're very important discussions that we're having because it solidifies concepts that are essential in our understanding of the personality of Godhead, both for our preaching and our personal practices. So we'll begin with chanting our prayers. Om Gyanantimirandasya Ginanginashilakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So thank you all for the opportunity to try and serve by these discussions on the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. This is very important and wonderful work by Srila Prabhupada that's based on the authorized biography of Lord Chaitanya. And this biography is called the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was written by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So I pray for all your blessings to justice to our class today so that we can get the right understanding to assist us in our service to the Lord and deepen our love for Him. So this chapter is actually Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's discussions with someone who came from an impersonalist background, a scholar called Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. This scholar was residing in the area called Navadvip, which is also where Lord Chaitanya appeared. We could say where he was born. But Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya left the Navadvip area before Lord Chaitanya appeared there. So he met the Lord for the first time in a place called Jagannath Puri when the Lord took sannyas at the age of 24. That event actually was commemorated this Monday past, which is known as Makar Sankranti. And it's a astrological event where, according to the Vedic calendar, the sun enters into the sign of Capricorn. So on that day, Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, and then he took residence in Jagannath Puri to please his mother, and there Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya met him. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had appeared to take sannyas from an impersonalist line, right? It means that the person he took sannyas from actually came from a background of impersonalism, right? Their teachings about the Vedanta, or the core scripture of our philosophy, basically, um, was coming from an impersonalist perspective, right? Believing that a formless divine is supreme, right? And that when God takes form, like Krishna, like Ram, then this form is not actually spiritual. We're supposed to, according to this philosophy, eventually move past this form to achieving the formless. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually corrected Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya from this idea through his discussions with him. So we started these discussions in chapter 24, and we're continuing them in chapter 25 now with part 3. And we'll see how the Bhattacharya is convinced in the next chapter, chapter 26. So we'll begin the invocation before our reading today. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. And the translation is: Glory to Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda, glory to Advaita Chandra, and glory to all the devotees of Sri Gaura, Lord Chaitanya. This verse is verse 18 of chapter 1 of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it's very important actually to understand both the aspects of the Lord that are formless as well as his original form. Right? And incidentally, in a nice way, we had a discussion last week at Tamahasa with His Holiness Ram Govinda Swami Maharaj about more or less the same topic. And Maharaj gave us a very nice analogy, right? He said that um, the aspects of the Lord, his own original form as well as um, his form of light. They're like two sides of the same coin. Right? So, as both sides are integral to the identity of the coin and it being accepted, right, as a real coin um, in trade. So, in the same way, these aspects of the Lord are part of him, his pastimes, his activities. And so the devotee actually needs to understand both. And so we see also that Krishna explains both in the Bhagavad Gita. Right? He discusses his Brahman feature in many places, particularly in the 14th chapter, where he states that the whole material substance, that means all of these universes, there's not just one as far as what we know from material science, right? There's many universes, innumerable, right? Like seeds, mustard seeds, it's described, right? As many mustard seeds as they are in a bag, that many universes they are. So all these mustard seeds, all these innumerable, you can't count them, universes, are all existing on a substance, and that substance, right, is actually the Brahman, right? This great effulgence of the Lord, the light around his transcendental form, is actually, we could say, the ground substance, right, that everything is existing on. And the Lord explains at the beginning of the 14th chapter in verses 3 and 4, the total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth, right? So although Brahman is not material, it's where the material worlds are existing on. And it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharat. So also in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's described that Krishna is this is like the gardener. He plants the seeds of the living entity through his glance, right? So these are quite extraordinary things. Um, but Srila Prabhupada explains it very nicely, so that we can more or less theoretically understand and then eventually realize it. So through his glance, the Lord is actually able to put the living entities into the material nature, and Brahman forms that fertile ground for all of this to happen. And then Krishna says in the next verse, it should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. So even the Brahman does have the role of being that ground substance for everything that exists. Krishna is still the seed-giving father, right? He's the one who actually plants the living entities in. He is the source of them, the living entities, all the substances of the material nature and of Brahman. Right? So therefore, Krishna says in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo, Mattaha Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo. Sorry, that line, second line is escaping me. Let me just check in the Bhagavad Gita. But he says that he is the source of the material and the spiritual creations. And this is essential for us to understand, because then we understand that Brahman is actually dependent on Krishna, not the other way around. And we'll read a verse in that regard just now. So the verse from the 10th chapter, Aham Sarvasya Prabho Mattaha Sarvam Pravartate Iti Madhava Jantemam Bhuda Bhava Samanvitaha. So when we understand, this verse is basically explaining to us that when we understand that Krishna is the source of all, then we dedicate ourselves to him. That's actually the point of understanding this. And so we see that across all religions, right, there is a central theme of creation and knowing about a creator. When you know your source, then you know that you're aiming to go back to that source. That's also a theme that goes across religions. So in this is very essential verse, actually one of the main verses of Bhagavad Gita, part of the Chatur Shloki, or the four seed verses. Aham Sarvasya Prabhu. When we know that Krishna is the source of the material and the spiritual worlds, basically that means the source of everything, right? Then the wise, Buddha Bhava Samanvitaha, they engage in their service to him, right? Knowing that he is their creator and knowing that they are meant to achieve him an eternal service with him. Right? So this is the import. This is the importance of understanding our creator. right? Otherwise, if we think that everything comes from the Brahman, then we'll think that we can actually return to the Brahman, and this is a point that we must address as well. But Krishna states in the same 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that he is the basis of the impersonal Brahman. It's not the other way around. It's not that Brahman is the source of him. He is the source of Brahman. Brahman is indeed immortal, imperishable, and eternal. This is true. It is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. And this is why people who attain to Brahman feel um, this great happiness. But still, beyond that is Krishna, who is the basis. And then, if we achieve Krishna, then we have the eternity, the knowledge, and the bliss, right? That actually Krishna puts into Brahman, right? The bliss, the eternity and happiness of Brahman comes from Krishna. And by associating with Krishna in devotional service to him, we actually transcend even that happiness of Brahman. Last week we also discussed that everybody has to come to that Brahman platform, and all kinds of yogis, everybody who's on different paths. In a way, this is why people state that all the paths can often converge at some point, but it's not where we're meant to stay. Attaining to the light, as is commonly thought to be um, the result of all spiritual activities, also thought to be the ultimate end for all paths. We could say it's an intermediate step. It's an intermediate step that we achieve, but the ultimate point is to achieve Krishna's abode. And this he also states repeatedly in Bhagavad Gita, notably chapters 4, chapter 7, chapter 15, that the ultimate goal is to attain him. And it's important that we understand that he doesn't actually mention in the Bhagavad Gita that we can achieve Brahman as a destination. He mentions we can achieve the planets of the Devatas, the demigods. He does state that. He mentions that we can achieve the forefathers. Right? He also mentions that we take birth repeatedly among these species in this world. Right? We can fall into the hellish planets. But he notes to us that all of this is temporary. We can achieve these destinations, they're temporary. And that the eternal position that we can achieve, attaining to him, our original source, this is our ultimate goal. Nowhere does he actually say that we can achieve the light, that we can become one with it. Right? This is very, very important, because this is a point that comes up very often in the discussions of Vedic teachings of Sanatana Dharma, what we call Hinduism today, which is actually the original Sanatana Dharma. Our goal is to attain what Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, the service to him, devotional service to him in his planet. Right? So any other destination is temporary, a stop along the way. And so us who have come to devotional service to Krishna should therefore understand the importance of it, because it's not an ordinary thing. He also explains in Bhagavad Gita that after many births, many, many, many births, going through so many spiritual processes and making those stops along the way, falling back to the material world, uh, going through all the species, then we come to service to Him. So the importance is for us to understand that we should make the most of that opportunity that we now have in order to attain Him and to get out of the cycle of birth and death. So also in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna is extolled as the cause of all causes. And it's important because at the beginning of the Vedanta Sutras, right, we explained that the Vedanta is taken as the prime scripture. Brahman is called the cause of all causes as well, Janmadasyataham. But now we know that Krishna is the source of Brahman. Right? So it means that the Brahman, who is being described as the cause of all causes in the Vedanta, is actually Krishna. So because the impersonalists take that the Brahman of the Vedanta is the light, right, then the understanding is that this light is what is supreme, and that Krishna's, when he comes to this material world in a form, is taking a form like yours and mine. So it's very important for us to get this correct understanding that whereas our forms are indeed material, right, and we do suffer from birth, death, old age, and disease, we generally are not experiencing eternality, complete knowledge or supreme knowledge, and um, bliss, complete happiness. Krishna's form is the exact opposite. As Srila Prabhupada mentioned so many times, we don't see Krishna getting old. We don't see him suffering from diseases. He certainly wasn't born, right? Therefore, we use the term appeared. In all his incarnations, he appears as himself, the original Krishna, Shamsundar, he appears and he doesn't die, he disappears. Right? This is very clear from our scriptures and our acharyas. And he is always thus eternal, and he's always demonstrating complete knowledge and total bliss. So, in no way is Krishna's expression of form the same like ours. And he himself is already stating another good point that Maharaj made on Saturday, that he is Matta Parataram Nanyat. There is nothing superior to him. So even Brahman is not superior to him. He's making this very clear. And everything is actually resting on him. So as everything is resting, as this material creation is resting on the substrate of Brahman, that Brahman is resting on Krishna. Krishna states this also. We quoted that. He is the basis. So in so many ways we can see that Krishna is our ultimate source, our ultimate goal, and therefore understanding him is essential to our practices. And we get that understanding through serving him, right? Because we can't just expect knowledge in such an important with such an important topic like the Supreme Personality of Godhead to just come to us the way we would study anything, right? To to show our strength and understanding and our um, ability. The knowledge of God comes through humility, through showing Him how much we want that knowledge, and it is completely within His decision to give us that knowledge of Him. And He tells us that if we are constantly serving Him with love, then we get that knowledge. And the result of getting that knowledge, He tells us in the fourth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, is that then you end the cycle of birth and death and you come to Him. So therefore, we have so much of knowledge, so much information about the Supreme Lord. We can never know everything. We can learn as much as we can sincerely, and when Krishna is pleased with that knowledge, along with the devotional service we render to him, he lets that knowledge become realized and become practical to us. It becomes knowledge that we can live. This is very important, and it's called realization. Right? That's the difference with realization. So we're going to start reading today, continuing this point about understanding Krishna. First of all, one should try to understand the constitutional position of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has an eternal, cognizant, blissful body, and his spiritual energy is called Chit Shakti. That's C-I-T, and in Sanskrit, C is always pronounced as Ch. So Chit Shakti is distributed as eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So, why is it important that we understand the constitutional position of the Supreme Lord? Well, like we were saying, ultimately so that we can attain Him, but also so that we don't get bewildered by seeing His form as the same like ours. Right? He says in the Bhagavad Gita that it is fools that deride Him, right, when He descends in an apparent human form, right? But already we know that this is not an ordinary form, right? And we're going to explain in a little bit more detail later on how that actually happens. It only appears human-like to our eyes, right? And there's a special reason why the Lord takes such a human form. And this is actually out of His mercy, Sri Prabhupada explains in the Srimad Bhagavatam, so that His devotees can associate with Him as they would someone on their level. Right? If the Lord is displaying His extraordinary universal form, if He's displaying His forearms, if He's displaying His wonderful forms as Matsyadev, the gigantic fish, or as half man, half lion, Lord Nrsingadev, one would not be able to have the relationships that one has with him in his his most divine pastimes in Vrindavan, right, where he's treated like an ordinary cowherd boy, where his mother chastises him, where his friends climb on his back during their play, right, where his girlfriends like Radharani chastise him. Can we imagine them doing that to four-armed Lord Narayan? Maharaj was also explaining that point, that all reverence, right, all reverential attitudes in service, right, those are for Lord Narayan, right, the Lord's more formal aspect. But when one wants to go beyond that and express one's love in relationships, like as a parent, as a friend, as a lover, then is this is what Krishna facilitates in his human-like form. Right? So unfortunately, those who can't understand this, they take it to be that Krishna has a form like yours and mine, and they take him to be an ordinary person. But now we're going to go um, more into detail and understanding the great power in his form, even if it appears to be like human, like a human. Right? So we can identify, right, with these particular three attributes, right? Eternity, knowledge, and bliss, because we're always trying to achieve that, right? In our own lives, we can see it. All of us want to be happy all the time, right? Eternal happiness. This is something that we search for. It's what we work for, right? We want to try and make ourselves comfortable so that we're always happy. Right? Certainly, we're always looking for knowledge outside of ourselves, right? We all don't have all knowledge. This is what we go to school for. This is what we go to university for. This is what we keep studying for, or we just keep learning, reading, right? Where even if it's fairly trivial knowledge, right, about our favorite celebrity, or whether it's real important spiritual knowledge, we always have to look for knowledge outside ourselves. And certainly, we're all looking in some way or the other, if not consciously, to make ourselves comfortable so that we can be here as long as possible. Right? The eternity principle is very much within us as well. All of us, as Srila Prabhupada says, are trying to make a permanent settlement here. And this is what we try to secure ourselves with. And we try to take care of this body as much as possible. We try to secure ourselves financially so that we can take care of any disasters that come by. We try to be careful. We try to get securities, insurances, all kinds of things, right? Because we're trying to be eternal. So we can sum it all up basically into these three things: eternity, knowledge, and bliss. We're trying to achieve all these things for a happy and comfortable permanent settlement. So even though we can't actually achieve that here, this much we see in the examples of ourselves and others, it doesn't mean that it's not possible. The reason why the soul craves these things is because it actually is possible, again, in that eternal home, the place that we're meant to go back to, right? The eternal home is where Krishna exists, right, in that spiritual world, in eternity and knowledge and bliss. And therefore, we can see why these things are, we could also put it in this way, worth it achieving. Right? We're craving it so much here. So we should know that there is a place that we can achieve it. Right? And this is in Krishna's abode. And this is why it is basically, we must understand what the soul is craving. Right? It wants this. So it wants Krishna. It wants to return to where it came from. And again, the means to do that is through service to him. So this is why also we must understand he has a form, because service has a meaning because of Krishna's form. Right? If Krishna is thought of as supremely without form, then there's no meaning to service to him. Because like we explained as well last week, the aspect of the formless divine, Krishna's impersonal Brahman, is light form, we could put it. There's no way you can render service. The light is without attributes. So in what way would you serve? Right? And with that thinking in mind, right, those who believe in that superiority of light, they relegate bhakti yoga, devotional service to Krishna, to a lower level. And they relegate it to the world of form, which they speak of as an illusion, which they speak of as um, being dedicated to Krishna's form, which they see as illusion. And they often feel like this is just part of our sentimental natures, and when we overcome it, right, when we come to what they think is real knowledge, surpassing the form of Krishna, then we achieve the light. But we've already explained that on the platform of the light, we're not going to achieve that eternity, knowledge, and bliss that we actually want. Right? This is what goes beyond the light to He who is beyond the light, He who is the source of light. And only by achieving Him can we satisfy the soul, because then we are in our original position, in our original nature, in our original home, the spiritual world with Krishna. So there's no surpassing Krishna anyway, because he has already stated in Bhagavad Gita that there's nothing superior to him. So again, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in preaching these points, defeats Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya very much on this concept of achieving the light. Something again, which we are um, explaining from Bhagavad Gita, we can't do. Like we can't achieve the light anyway. Like we should be achieving or trying to attain Krishna's eternal nature, which is something all of us want. So let's look at that internal nature a bit more. So when we talk about the internal nature of Krishna, which is in eternity, knowledge, and bliss, um, we know that right now we are craving it outside of ourselves. Right? If we were feeling eternal all the time, we wouldn't have this urge to continue protecting ourselves. We wouldn't be fearful of death, which everybody is. You can see it even in the birds. Even when they're picking at the ground, they're looking left, right, right? Animals do it. Everything, everyone is conscious of actually being mortal, right? Of dying. This is um, this is something that even if we're not uh, aware of it, we are actually fearful of it on some level. All living beings. And again, we're always searching for knowledge outside of ourselves. Um, if we possessed all knowledge, we wouldn't have to go to school. We wouldn't have to go to university. And as well, if we were happy within ourselves, then we wouldn't need the company of other people. We'd never have families. We'd never have associates, friends like that. So all we actually are, we also discussed this last week, is that we're just conscious. This is our property in a spiritual sense. This consciousness is basically the only spiritual property that we have. When that consciousness leaves with the soul, then the body becomes like any other material substance. So this consciousness is the particle of well, it's a spiritual symptom. Let's put it that way, right? It's a spiritual symptom, and this is what we are capable of right now. Right? That's all we're actually capable of. So when the soul goes, the consciousness goes. The body becomes just like any other material object, right? It basically falls apart to its constituent earth, water, fire, air, and ether. But Krishna's consciousness is much greater and much more capable than us. Right? His consciousness is full of knowledge in himself. It's intrinsic to him. He doesn't have to go looking for it somewhere else. His eternality is intrinsic to him. He doesn't have to search it out, right, in some way, trying to find the elixir of youth or anything like that, right? His bliss, his happiness is within himself. But he has the unique ability of transforming it outward, right? And this is how all his energies are manifested. So these things are intrinsic to him. It's not a part of him, it is him, right? And this is how his powers are actually displayed through the eternality, knowledge, and bliss. We'll discuss a bit more of that now. Um, so we're going to read quotes from the ISKCON Desire Tree website that are quite nice in this regard and helps give us some understanding of this. I know it's a little esoteric, but I hope you'll bear with me. So Chit Shakti, right? That's Krishna's internal energy. We also call it Swarup Shakti. It is Antaranga or internal. So like we're saying, all the power of Krishna's is internal. He doesn't have to look for it outside of himself. It has infinite opulence, and the divine realms, such as the countless Vaikunthas, are made of this Shakti. So Krishna can turn his power outward in order to manifest everything. Like here, the Vaikuntha planets, all the spiritual planets. And we're going to read a bit more about how he can manifest divine persons, divine places, all of that through this Shakti. Then there's a quote from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. We hear about the Shakti of the divine being. So in other places, right, particularly these Vedic literatures, there is the Shakti, this power, this intrinsic power of the Supreme Lord. And so it means that it can't be denied if it's spoken of in the Vedas. Right? Repeatedly, we quote the Vedic scriptures about all the attributes of God, all the characteristics of God, all the powers of God, right? All of this implying that he must have form. Right? To be without form means no characteristics, no powers, no energies, no shaktis, no features. And this is something that impersonalist philosophy, although it tries to be based in the Vedas, is actually completely opposite to. Because in stating that the Supreme Brahman is without features means he doesn't have these things like energies. But clearly, the Shuddhashtara Upanishad, like other Upanishads and scriptures, are speaking of the energies of God. And all of this can only be present in a God of form, a supreme God of form, Krishna. The Chit Shakti or Antaranga Shakti is this um, divine, this Shakti of the divine being. This Shakti is the closest to Sri Bhagavan. So that's why it's called eternal, right? Because it's actually him, right? It's him, but we're speaking of it as if it's separate from him in order to understand it. But the Shakti and the Shaktiman, the possessor of the Shakti, are one anyway. Right? And we've used this example repeatedly. I am a person, but I have powers to do things. I have powers to speak. I have powers to understand things and then speak. I have powers to eat, to digest food, and then utilize that to carry out my activities, right, including speaking. So all of my powers, right, belong to me, but we can speak of them in a way that we could consider them separate of me at the same time. Right? So there's like that concept of being one and different also. Because the powers don't have an identity outside of me. Right? My power to speak can't jump out of me and then like walk around speaking. But at the same time, it's an ability. But Krishna's powers are different. Right? Krishna's powers can't exist outside of him, but at the same time, he can personify those powers into souls like us and into divine beings like Srimati Radharani, his incarnation like Lord Balaram, and they can actually exist as if separate from him, but really they're not separate from him at all. So again, it's a little bit esoteric, but we must always understand that Krishna's Shakti is intrinsically him, right? It is all him, and therefore the closest to him. Um, and either way, it's not coming from anyone outside of him. It's all him. People can claim that the Gopi, Srimati Radharani, they were like separate beings and married to others and all kinds of things. But that's for the Lord's own internal um, pleasure pastimes. Radharani and her companions are all manifestations of Krishna's own Shakti. Right? So they're all him in a sense. Right? And he doesn't have to look outside of himself to get happiness. It is self-manifesting. So everything comes from it. Right? It manifests itself and it manifests everything else. And it is the opposite of non-conscious, meaning the opposite of material, where everything in the material world we see is dead, right? We look at the couch, it's dead. It can't do anything on its own. It's not conscious, right? Stones are unconscious. Everything without the soul is unconscious. And only while the soul is present in something is it conscious, and otherwise it's not. Hence, it is consciousness or Chit Shakti. So, this is Krishna's supreme consciousness compared to ours. My consciousness is only limited to my body. I can only be aware of what this body is feeling. I can't really feel what yours is feeling. But Krishna's supreme consciousness pervades all of creation, pervades the spiritual creation, and it pervades also the material creation, right? Krishna can be present or is present in every one at the same time, and as well as in every atom of every single object, right? Even if that object is inanimate. And this is Krishna's consciousness. And the source of that supreme consciousness is Krishna himself, and um, this internal energy of his, right, called Chit Shakti. Um, it is present in supreme being's swarup or form, and therefore we also call it Swarup Shakti. So this is a very important point now, that this consciousness or Chit Shakti is the same as Krishna's body. Right? My consciousness right now is not the same as my body. Right? We've already discussed this. When my consciousness, the symptom of the soul, leaves, right, with the soul, the body is dead. But Krishna's form is the same as his consciousness. It means that it's all spiritual. Right? So once more, we say that it's actually all one. Right? Krishna's consciousness, his personality, his body. It's really not like what we experience here, where we have a soul that's conscious, we have a personality that's embedded in the subtle body, the mind, we have the body, which is totally different. Right? There, everything is the same, but we speak of it in different ways, all the aspects of Krishna, in order to understand better how powerful he is. So, to emphasize that the Chit Shakti or the consciousness of Krishna is the same as him, it's also called Swarup Shakti, right? That means intrinsic to his form. And this is how we can understand that his form will not die like ours. So it's definitely not ordinary, and it's definitely not like what people who believe in an impersonal, formless God say, that any form, including those of Krishna, is actually material. In no way is Krishna's form material. His form is eternity, knowledge, and bliss, just like his Chit Shakti, because it is the same. It is greater, that is the Chit Shakti, than the other two Shaktis in nature and glory. So, what are the other two Shaktis? So, Krishna's internal Shakti, right, the Swarup Shakti, the Chit Shakti, the Antaranga Shakti, is internal, right? It is him. But he also has other Shaktis that manifest externally, right? Um, but like we said, even if these powers are external to him, they're still meant to serve him. Just like all my powers serve me. I can't externalize that power. I can't take my power to express myself and make it into something that serves me out of me. But Krishna can do that. So the two Shaktis that we're speaking of here, that we could say, externalized, is what is known as the external energy, and it's called the Bahiranga Shakti, that is this material nature. And its external position is noted by the fact that it's not conscious. If it's not conscious, it becomes conscious only when Krishna pervades it with the living entities and with himself, right? The supreme consciousness. And the other power is the Tatastha Shakti that sits in between both the spiritual and the material nature. Right? And that's us, right? That's the souls. So we have the independence to choose to come under the shelter of the material nature, or we choose to be part of the spiritual nature. Either way, all the energies, Krishna's internal energy, the external energy of this material nature, as well as us marginal energies, the in between, the souls, everything's meant to serve him. Right? Just like all my powers of the body are meant to serve me. Mm. The material energy, though, it appears to be existing on its own, right? Because generally we don't think that Krishna is here, but he's pervading it all, right? He's keeping an eye on it, we could say, on all of us to guide us back to him. That's how the material energy serves him. Right? It becomes the playing field for the living entities to discover their original mistake of coming to the material world and then try to engage in devotional service to Krishna. So this is how we can understand the purpose for what this material creation is there for. So Krishna speaks in Bhagavad Gita about how these two energies are actually his, and these verses are from the 7th chapter, 4 and 5. He speaks first of the material energy. He says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 constitute my separated material energies. So we see that word separated is important here. Binna. Binna, it's not conscious like Krishna or us, right? It's separated in that way from him. It's not it doesn't have the same properties as Krishna, eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Okay. And then he says, besides these, this is verse 5 now of chapter 7. Almighty Aunt Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mine. The superior is parang. Superior to what? Superior to the material energy. Why? Because it's conscious. Right? That's us. There is another superior energy of mind which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So we know this nature is not conscious. So what do? We try to exploit it. Can't do anything. It can't retaliate. Right? So we thinking that we are in charge of it, we just try to do what we want. Right? So we misuse our consciousness towards trying to please ourselves, and we cause a lot of trouble, right? Usually, which comes to us in the form of karma. Um, and this is what us, although being superior, this is how we get entangled in the material nature and trying to use it for ourselves. But we are superior. We're meant to not be identifying with material nature. We're meant to be identifying with spiritual nature. And then we come into our superior aspect of being eternal, knowledgeable, and blissful. Right? So, um, compared to these two Shaktis, right, the external energy, and compared to us, Krishna's Krishna, the supreme energy. You could say Krishna himself is this energy, although we said he is the possessor of the energy. But Krishna, being the same as his energy, is superior to both. Right? His Chit Shakti, his his self, right, which is his energies, is superior to both and is actually the source of both. Um, and so Krishna's Swarup Shakti, his Antaranga Shakti, is Chit Shakti, Antaranga Shakti, and Swarup Shakti is called Parashakti, right, which means supreme. Right? So it has the following names. We've said Antaranga, internal, Chit, conscious, Swarup, his form, and Para, supreme. Right? Parashakti. So in total, this the power of Krishna, um, this Chit Shakti, takes 3 forms: Satchit, Ananda. Okay, so we may have come across this term before: Satchit and Ananda. Sat is eternity, Chit is knowledge, and Ananda is bliss or happiness. Right? So it means that it takes 3 forms. Right? So let's try and understand this quickly before we close. Um, so let's take an example. Right? I've got the ability to eat. I've got the ability to bring something into existence, right, in a creative way. I've got the ability to study. But at different times, I'm focusing on different things. So if I'm focusing on eating, right, my mind is putting together how I'm going to cook. My hands are um, preparing the ingredients. Eventually, right, my stomach will be focused on digesting it. And even though I can certainly create something and I can certainly study, at that moment I'm not focused on those abilities. Because I'm cooking doesn't mean that I've lost the ability to do anything else. Right? It just means that my focus at the time is this. So if I'm now gardening, right, now my energies are focused on that. Right? I'm thinking about the layout of the garden. I'm using my hands to plant the plants, and my legs are carrying me around. I have the ability to eat. I could actually be eating at the same time, well, if my hands are clean. So I could have a snack, but that might just be a small bite. It's not like a big meal that I'm focused on, because my focus is on the creating the garden. Right? So my energy is still there to eat. but I've got to focus. There's something that I'm actually trying to do at that moment that's actually dominant, right? It's my dominant activity at the time, even though I have other powers, right? And if I want to enjoy myself, and if I just want to kick back and have a good time, then I'm primarily focused on that enjoyment, right? So I'm not cooking, I'm not digging in the garden. I still have the ability to do those things, but my focus now is on enjoyment. So, so that's one. Um, that's what's keeping me occupied. Okay. So Krishna also primarily manifests his three energies, right? Um, when his chit shakti is focused on manifesting, creating things, right? Then it is called Sandini. It's called Sandini Shakti. It's a power of eternality, right? It means that now Krishna is focused on the creation, either of the spiritual world or all of the spiritual things that Krishna needs for his pastimes and activities. Right? Then there's Samvit, right? When the Chit Shakti is conveying knowledge or consciousness, right? It expresses itself as Samvit. When Krishna is focusing on knowledge, particularly that is enlightening us about him, right? When he gives us knowledge, like through the Vedas, through the Bhagavad Gita. And when Krishna's power is primarily expressing bliss, right, for him to enjoy happiness, then this is called Hladini. Right? So Krishna's other powers are all there still, right? But um, he's expressing one over the other, right? For whatever his pastime or activity is. Although Sri Bhagavan is Sat personified, so in his person, that is his body as it is, he's already eternal. Right? But through his power, his chit, his own self, he can also express it in a dominant way to make others eternal, to make other things eternal, to create other things like the eternal spiritual planets, like we're speaking of before. And in that way, he uses um, particularly his property of eternality through his Chit Shakti as Sandini. And so I call it Sandini Shakti. And so he creates this material, sorry, he creates a spiritual world, as well as every time he appears, he recreates his spiritual world wherever he is, right? This is him expressing his chit as Sandini to make other things eternal. Sri Bhagavan is the embodiment of knowledge, yet he uses the Samvit Shakti to know himself and make others know about him. So his form is already knowledge personified. But in order to make us understand him, right, he uses his chit himself, right, through the medium, particularly of knowledge, right, and this is called the Samvit Shakti. So this is how we know him. And then Sri Bhagavan is bliss, right? He is actually happiness intrinsically, but he can express, right, bliss as well through his Ladini Shakti, most famously, which takes the form of Srimati Radharani, to bring him happiness, right? And he can make others happy in this way also. Just as we cannot separate Sri Bhagavan, Satchit, and Ananda, Sandini, Samvit, and Hladini too are intermingled with each other. So, like we said, all can exist at the same time in Krishna, but as one is more expressed, right, it facilitates Krishna's activities or his pastimes in that, but they're not actually separate. So, um, we will end off by saying that just like we stated at the beginning, it's not that Krishna needs something outside of him to be happy, or outside of him to be eternal, or outside of him um, to be to get knowledge. Right? He actually has ways to to take that intrinsic happiness and knowledge and eternality and translate it into external conditions for all of us to experience also, right? And for him to experience. But either way, it's all him. It's not coming from an outside source. This is a very important point that we must note. Krishna is the source of all of these these attributes, right? He's not like us, who need it from outside. So I think we'll close here. There's quite a few concepts that are related to this. And I know it sounds a bit technical, but we're going through it for, again, the reason that we understand what makes Krishna different from us and what makes his form superior over all, right? As the source of everything rather than being created, right? And this deepens our faith in him. It increases the intensity by which we perform our devotional service to him. And this, in the end, translates to us achieving him faster, right? Particularly, we're trying to achieve him in this life. So even though the details may seem a little bit technical, but it's just enough that we know um, that this knowledge is there, and it will become more clearer to us in time with our devotional practices. Right? But then we also understand that there really is a science to God, like Sri Prabhupada has said many times. It is a technical subject, as it should be, right, for the most important personality in all of creation. Okay, so thank you all so much for your kind attention. Shri Shantai, Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Are there any questions or comments or any points to clarify?
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Mataji, so at the moment we are the Tatashta Shakti, the marginal energy. If we at some stage achieve our spiritual goal, which is to leave this material world, are we then no longer marginal energy? Are we now then sort of moving into a different realm of energies, if I can put it that way?
That's a good question. I think, well, not I think, but we always remain marginal energies. We always remain with the ability to come under the spell of the material energy, right? So this category, we could say, doesn't actually change. But what changes is our expression of that position, right? So either we express that nature of ours to serve under the material energy, in which case we're trying to serve ourselves, or we express it under the care of the spiritual energy, Srimati Radharani, and then we can actually develop ourselves to our full potential, right? Currently, we're only experiencing consciousness, right? We're only expressing consciousness because we've taken shelter of the material energy. And here we can't express eternality, knowledge, and bliss. It's not the right environment for that, right? It's like we go to a very cold environment, but we want to express, what it's like to be in a very hot environment. It's not going to work, right? We can't go to the North Pole and think that we can kick back like it's the beach, right? I hope that analogy fits. We have to come into the right atmosphere, the spiritual atmosphere, in order for our consciousness to start expressing, right, that eternality, knowledge, and bliss in a very small way, like how Krishna does in a very big way. Right? That's unique to him. We can't become him. But in our own sense, we can become eternal knowledge and knowledgeable and blissful by coming back under the shelter of the material, of the spiritual energy. Right? So we will always remain marginal, but when we're situated where we belong in the spiritual energy, then we're actually fully expressing our qualities. And that actually brings us to that level that Bhagavad Gita speaks of, where we become of the same nature as Krishna. So we may not be changing our category, right? We're still Tatastha. But now, as Tatastha Shakti, we have become of the same quality of Krishna. As he is eternal, knowledgeable, and blissful, we also become the same. And that verse is 14, 16 of chapter 4. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmanahutam. Sorry, I'm just 24, not 14. Sorry. So by our worship of Krishna, we become of the same nature as him. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmanahutam Brahmevatena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So that full absorption in Krishna consciousness means one is completely situated in that spiritual energy. He's sure to attain the spiritual kingdom, right, which is composed of eternality, knowledge, and bliss, because of his full contribution to spiritual activities. So that full engagement in devotional service has placed one in that spiritual nature, eternality, knowledge, and bliss, in which the consummation is absolute, right, and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Okay? So we become part of that spiritual nature, but it actually is more like we are situated back in our original natures than we have actually changed our natures. Those natures have become fully expressed now rather than having changed. Whereas in the material world, it was so underexpressed that it actually felt like we were something different. Does that make sense, Prabhu? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Yeah, I think we lost Prabhu there. I will catch up with him if he doesn't rejoin the call to check if that was okay. But I hope that was clear as well to everybody else. So basically, our in between nature just gets realized to its full spiritual potential, right? When we go to the spiritual world. So if there's no other questions or comments, then we're going to glorify the Lord in his eternal and wonderful form as Lord Ram, because coming up this weekend is the inauguration of the Ram Mandir in the place of the Lord's appearance in Ayodhya. Right? So the 2 main days, actually the festivities have already started with all of the installation procedures and and the rituals of bringing the Lord into his murti form. They're quite intricate. It requires a lot of spiritual activities in the next few days, but the particular activities for bringing him and for Pran Pratishtha, putting his life, and his Chit Shakti into that form of his, that will be happening on Sunday and Mondays. And Sunday is Ekadashi, and Monday on the Dwadashi, I think, is the main day. Right? So the Shishiradhana temple and the New Jagannath temple are commemorating the events on Sunday and Monday. And yeah, we encourage everybody to join in on that. So we will sing a very, very nice and very well known bhajan in praise of Lord Ram today. And what's interesting is that there's actually a lot more verses to it than what we know of. Right? This is Raghupati Raghavaraja Ram, but there's actually 3 other verses. And it was written by a devotee named Lakshmanacharya. Um, so Raghupati Raghav Raja Ram Patita Pavanam Sitaram Raghupati Raghav Raja Ram Patita Pavanam Sitaram 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 Jaya Sitaram Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram Patita Pavana Sitaram Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram Patita Pavana Sitaram Sundar Vigraha Megha Sham Ganga tulasi shaladam Sundar Vighasham Ganga tulasi shaladam Ragupati Raghav Rajaram Patita Pavan Sitaram Ragupati Raghav Rajaram Patita Pavan Sitaram Bhadra Girishwar Sitaram Bhagata Janpriya Sitaram Bhadragirishwar Sitaram Bhagata Janpriya Sitaram Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram Janaki Ramana Sitaram Jaya Jaya Raghava Sitaram Janaki Ramana Sitaram Jaya Jaya Raghava Sitaram Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram 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 Jaya Sitaram 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 Jaya Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai, Shri Shintai Gaur Hari ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shintai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. So let's read the translation. The refrain is, the Lord of the Raghus, the descendant of the Raghu dynasty, King Ramachandra, the purifier of the fallen, glories to Shri Shri Sitaram. The beautiful deity forms a dark as a thunder cloud, glories to the Ganga, Tulasi Devi, and Shaligram Shila. The auspicious Lord of the mountain, Sitaram, the ones dear to the devotees, Sitaram. The beloved of the daughter of Janaka, all glories to Sitaram. All glories to the descendant of the Raghu dynasty, Sitaram. So again, thank you all so much for joining us today. And please join us next week when we continue our discussions on this very wonderful chapter of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhupada. Thank you.